Hey everyone, I'm Alex, and welcome to The Roasted Mind, the show where we enjoy some coffee, have a conversation about self-help, personal interests, and growth, and express the thoughts that can be a bit harder to discuss. So, have a seat, grab a cup of coffee, let's talk. Good morning, everybody. Once again, happy Saturday. And today, in my cup, I have a cold brew. This is specifically a cold brew concentrate because I didn't have the stock to make the cold brew. And two, I don't really think I have a flavor of coffee that I would want to make cold brew with, or like the beans. So once I get beans and once I get a sock, then that'll actually be pretty cool to make my own cold brew in the correct way. But this is just a cold brew concentrate, which I guess it does the job. It's pretty strong. And what I did was I have these frozen cold brew cubes, and I just fill up an ice tray with the cold brew concentrate, freeze them, and then I pop it in my iced coffee, whether it's a latte or, if I want something cold. That way when they melt, it's just more coffee. It's not more water diluting the coffee. And it's a little bit at the bottom of the cup, but it's oat milk. I prefer oat milk rather than almond milk or regular milk. Oat milk is just, I read that it was really nutritious for you, and it's just creamier. It's a lot better and tastier, honestly. Today I want to talk about valuing yourself. I want to talk about giving yourself that time that maybe you've given others, or maybe it's that time that you've never really given yourself. The attention, those experiences, the moments that really build up who you are today, or who you'll be tomorrow, or in a year from now, or in 10 years from now. A lot of that time that you start giving yourself from day one, from whenever you want to start. For me, it was when I started back in last fall, and I really gave myself that attention. I started dropping friends, and I started kind of really putting a lot of my energy into myself and really evaluating really what I want to do and who I want to be and what my interests really were. A lot of that can really build you up from day one, whenever you want to start, into where you want to be whenever the end goal is. And kind of the odd part about it, and it's really hard to say, but there really isn't an end time. There really isn't a time for you to just kind of say, oh, I want to have myself built by May of 2023, and that's it. Because not everybody has that privilege, or really not everybody has that really openness in their schedule to just kind of say, well, I'm really going to focus on myself 24/7. Mind you, you work a job, mind you've got family, you've got siblings or friends, that the ones that you don't want to drop, and you have pets, mind you have all these obligations. Maybe something happens, maybe there's a video game you really want to play that comes out and that really takes your time. Maybe you want to learn a new language, maybe you're reading a new book. There's so many things that can kind of stop you from focusing on yourself. Little minor things, but in itself, those things are focusing on you in general. Maybe they're not the bigger pieces of what you want to build up, but these are little things that you enjoy. And the more you spend time on these enjoyable things that you find quote unquote enjoyable, then the easier it will be to kind of let your interests roam free, or really find out what really curbs your enthusiasm in a way. And in that sense, your life becomes more enjoyable. Cold brew is pretty interesting because this is a coffee that is steeped in cold water. These are coarser ground beans that are steeped in cold water for over 12 hours. The longer you steep them in, the stronger it'll be. And they typically have more caffeine than an espresso. So this is the coffee that if you really want your kick, if you really want to be up and energized throughout the day, and you aren't pounding them down regularly, then this is the coffee for you. When I first started nursing school, I was pounding down cold brews every day, maybe twice a day, because this was my coffee of choice at one point. And this is when I first started getting into coffee. So imagine, starting from zero, teas, not even, to straight cold brew. And man, when I tell you, I was wired, I had these palpitations. I was just like, I was more feeling the effects of the coffee rather than like the energize, the caffeine itself. And that was so bad. But now look at me. Now I'm like, I can drink 2 of these and not really feel much, which is bad. But I do still enjoy the taste. And no way, I don't drink 2 of them. I know my limits, because I don't want to really go into caffeine overload there. But these were my go-tos at one point. And because of that strength that it has, right? When I mentioned that it has more caffeine than espresso, I believe I remember reading that an ounce of espresso has about 60 or 70 milligrams of caffeine. And when you're drinking espresso, you're only drinking that, that little bit of espresso, maybe a double shot, triple shot. But when you're drinking cold brew, you can order these in a large. You go to Starbucks, you can order them in the largest one, or Dutch Bros, you can order them in the largest one. Wherever you go, you can order them in 8 ounces, 16 ounces, 24 ounces. If you get nitro, some places will let you order a little less, but I mean, that even has more caffeine. And there, I think you can get them like 16 ounces probably. So they have a lot of caffeine. And so in comparison, the 8 ounces of cold brew, I believe, has about 240, if I'm not mistaken, milligrams of caffeine. And like I said, you're not drinking 1 ounce of cold brew. So it's in that way that it is comparable. It is comparable because you can't say that, oh, 1 ounce of espresso versus 1 ounce of cold brew, because in reality, you're not drinking 1 ounce of cold brew and you're not drinking 8 ounces of espresso, right? So this is a strong drink. This is a really, really strong drink. And the longer you steep it, the stronger it becomes. It's kind of, again, to really, when you focus on yourself and the more time that you kind of give yourself. And I'm not saying, again, that there's a time frame, right? Because in my case, I was up and ready to really be me, to be Alex, in about 3-4 months time from when I had started really giving myself that focus. But there are people that can really do it longer. There are people that need to do it longer, or that would benefit from doing it longer. And those people end up becoming much stronger, not in comparison, but to themselves. For me, I ended up becoming stronger than my past self. I ended up becoming more, in a way, me. If you catch my drift, this is something that you give yourself that time, and it really clears your head, and it really opens up new pathways for what you want to do in the future. This really shows you, well, maybe I do have an interest in this thing, or maybe I do like this certain food, or maybe I do like to do these certain things. This time that you're giving yourself, it just continues to build and build and build right at one after the other to become really who you are and who you want to be. And that's amazing. That's amazing, that time, which seemingly kind of ends you. It seemingly kind of, you're always on this race against time. Now you're using it to your benefit. Now you're using it to really build up who you are and become a better person than who you were yesterday. Because this time that really is kind of, in a grim sense, counting down the days, you start to make it worthwhile. You start to make that time enjoyable. You start to make that time really, really worth your time. And it's incredible, because the more time you give yourself, whether it's eating alone or whether it's reading a book or something by yourself, people find that empowering. And, I will always say, who cares what people think? I will always say, it doesn't matter what people have to say about your life. It does not matter, because that's your life, and you can do whatever the hell you want with it, no matter what anybody says. But in reality, people do care. In reality, there is that kind of comparison. There is that kind of side eye. Let's look at what the other person is doing. Because let's say you go out to eat. You go out to eat by yourself. And people admire that, right? Not in a negative light. People do admire that. And you'll hear it on social media all the time. On Twitter, you'll scroll down and people will always say, well, I really do admire people eating by themselves, and I wish I could do that, and I wish I could go to a coffee shop alone and just sit there and experience, your surroundings by yourself. No phone, no technology, whatever. Oh, I really wish I could go on a solo trip by myself. I really wish I could go hiking by myself. People admire that time that you give yourself. People really do admire when you give yourself time. I mean, I know I just reworded that, but it's true. It's kind of hard to put in another way because it's so blunt. It's so in your face to the point. And when you're really giving yourself that time, you're going to start seeing people use you as a comparison. And not in a bad way, in a really good way. In a really good way, because maybe you kind of giving yourself all that time and focusing and valuing yourself is going to be the fuel for somebody else to do it, and then somebody else to do it. So now you're starting a spiral. You're starting a roller coaster, a boulder, and that's incredible. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with doing things by yourself, because it's really satisfactory. it's incredibly satisfactory when you get to that point, when you get to those choices, and you have to make, choice A and choice B, and later down the road you start to see those come back, and you really start to do, in hindsight, say, well, wow, I'm so thankful for these choices that I made. And you kind of start to look back at those, and listen to those songs that you used to listen to, and they really remind you of that time. um in my experience, that song that always reminds me of going back then to a couple months ago, to, I want to say, September or August of 2022, when I really started to drop people that didn't matter to me, or not really didn't matter to me, but were more hindrances to me than they were beneficial, and really start to give myself time, create new hobbies, new interests, and really start to focus on what I want to focus on. There's a song that will always get me to remember that point, and it's kind of a cheesy, tacky song to remember, but it's "When We Are Together" by the 1975, and that song kind of reminds me of fall. It kind of reminds me of winter, of that kind of cold season, wearing a sweater and going out and just going on a drive and really clearing your head, because that's what I would do. I would go out and clear my head. I would go out and drive. I would go to coffee shops every Friday when I was off work and just really do nothing there except enjoy my surroundings. And when I hear that song, it really reminds me of that time. It really reminds me of the fall of last year, where I started to give myself the attention and give myself the time that I never really gave myself at all, that I would continue to give others, and be selfish about it. And there's kind of this boldness in being selfish. You know, there's just kind of this boldness. There's like coffee, just like this cold brew coffee. Cold brew is very bold. This is a coffee that's very in your face. Not so much like an instant coffee, where that distinct cut of your tongue kind of really is so bitter that you enjoy it in a way. This is something where it's very bold. These flavors are very, very, they're nutty and they're sweet, but you drink it and it's kind of hard to stomach black, especially when it's the cold brew concentrate, right? Because you have to add water to that. Otherwise, it's really like, really, really pungent in your face like that. And so there's kind of this boldness in the same way of being selfish, of giving yourself time that you don't really have. Like I said, we're always in this race against time. So you kind of have to use it all as you can. And so when you're doing yourself and you start to drop people and you start to really evaluate what matters to you and what really kind of who you want in your life, that can be seen as selfish. That can be seen as a complete flip from who you were before. Because before, maybe you gave all this attention to your friends. Maybe you gave all this attention to somebody who doesn't really give it to you back. But that's kind of the whole point of it, right? That's kind of the whole point of you valuing yourself, is to be selfish. Because if you're not selfish at all, then who are you? Do you know what you like? Do you know who you are? Do you know what kind of gets you up in the morning? You're so used to giving yourself this time to others, to putting in an effort to people that don't really matter to you, or maybe you don't really matter to them. Why is it so bad to be selfish when they're always so selfish to you? And I'm not saying that in a way of comparing, and I'm not saying that in a way of spite. I'm saying this because when you're selfish in a way of kind of putting things first, putting your things first, and putting your mental state and your time and your experiences first, people's expectations can be shifted. People's expectations can be 100% shifted because they're so used to this. But it's not their life that you're living. It's not their experiences you're going through. You can't constantly be chewing their gum. You have your own life, your own background, your own upbringing. And in 10 years' time, when they're completely out of your life and you've kind of built up your own self, is that really going to be so bad that you were so selfish back then? Are you still going to be feeling terrible that, oh, you gave yourself this time that you were giving somebody else? And I say that a lot, right? I say that a lot about giving time that you've given to somebody else. But that's kind of the essence of this whole discussion. That's kind of the backbone of valuing yourself, of being selfish, is taking something that you would give somebody else, even though they were essentially a leech, even though they were really using up that time that you would give them for themselves and not really for you. You take that time and you take it back. And yeah, you're not going to get it back. Unfortunately, that time is lost. But that doesn't mean you can't start now. That doesn't mean the time that's to come is going to be lost as well. You start to use it selfishly, in a selfish, really kind of productive way. You start to learn a new instrument, and maybe you start to catch up on your backlog of TV or anime or video games. Or maybe you really want to buy a cat and you go and you buy a pet because now you have time to take care of it. The selfishness is unfortunately perceived for coldness, but don't be deterred by that. Because, again, who cares what other people think? It's your life. It's not theirs. And if you want to be selfish and you want to do these things for yourself and you want to experience your own life and your own experiences and drink your own cup of coffee, order your own food, then hell, maybe some coldness is right in the world. Maybe there should be a winter for the 4 seasons. And what's kind of funny is how these people that don't really change, they don't take care of themselves. Right? And I'm not talking about like physically, I'm talking mentally. I'm talking they don't really give themselves this time to find out who they are, what they like, what they want to do. And maybe they don't have an option. Maybe it's not their fault. And to them, I say, your time is coming. You will find yourself. You will better yourself than who you were yesterday. There's nothing wrong with that. And I'm sorry that you can't give yourself that time. Maybe your hands are tied. Maybe you have things you really need to do. But it's not forever. And so I really do cheer for you. I really do wish you the best. But these people who don't have their hands tied and they don't really choose to do better, well, I kind of hope them the best as well. I don't hope them any worse. But these are the people that kind of feel themselves confused how the people around them are changing and they wish they weren't. I have a friend who unfortunately is under that circumstance, who never really got that time to grow up with all of us after high school. Never really got that time to experience our experiences. And they had their own experiences, that's for sure. They grew up a lot sooner than we did. But that wasn't really beneficial in a way where their mental state wasn't changing. It was just their sociable life. They really did have to grow up and become an adult a lot faster than we did. And so whenever they come and visit and they complain, we have these coffee talks. We sit down, we have a cup of coffee, and we really kind of catch up and get to know each other again, because it's been so long since we last seen each other and we really start to open up to each other. There's always that complaint of, I hate how everybody's changing. Everybody's so different than when I last left. But can you really blame them? Because now they're giving themselves that effort. Now they really figured out who they want to be, what they like, what they want to do. Maybe some of them have kids with their love of their life. Maybe some of them have all these other things that they're taking into account. Maybe some are depressed. Maybe some are happy. Maybe some just don't want the extra people in their life, and maybe others want more. You can't really blame them for that change. And it's kind of a great thing that they've changed, right? Because the more you stay static, well, then your life is just a line. It's just a line, and there's no up or down. There's no mountain. There's no shift. And I kind of find that really fascinating, that the amount of change that I've noticed people go through, especially in recent years, how mental health has become really a big topic. And there's been a lot of this social media push. One of the biggest things about social media is now there's that push for people to kind of focus themselves, eat the foods they want to eat, do the things they want to do, travel. I find that incredibly fascinating, how change now is more encouraged. When back then there used to be a lot of these songs that would discourage change, that would say they missed the people who would change. And there's something really, really selfish about it, but in a great way. And I admire that. I admire that selfishness that people are finally giving themselves, that people are finally doing. Because that selfishness really adds flair. That selfishness really does add that pop into somebody's life, right? Kind of like nitro. When you put nitrogen in a cold brew, it adds this sweet flavor. It adds this creamy texture, makes it really smooth, and it's pretty cool to look at. You can't lie, when you look at a cup of cold brew coffee, that nitrogen kind of going from the bottom to the top and really floating down into the coffee. I think that's one of the coolest and one of the most rewarding things to look at in a cup of coffee, right? Is that nitrogen in the cold brew, the nitrogen gas. And it makes it even cool because it adds more caffeine to the nitrogen or to the coffee. Nitrogen in itself doesn't have caffeine, but it pulls more of that caffeine out of your cold brew. So it ends up becoming a stronger coffee. That's why places like Starbucks and, well, I'm not really too sure anywhere else. That's really the only place I know that restricts their sizes on the nitro because it's so strong. But that nitrogen really brings out the best in the cold brew. It really adds and brings out that flair that cold brew can have. And I think that's incredible. I love always getting nitrogen. Hell, if I could get nitrogen in my cold brew now in my cup, then I would have nitrogen flowing. You guys would be able to see the nitrogen flowing down the cup. When you seriously get into a hobby and you really start to develop yourself into this hobby, and you really start to let the hobby develop into you, and your personality changes into that hobby, or you really put your mental state and you put your thoughts and your experiences in this thing, like writing a piano song or writing a book, or maybe it's cooking with a big flair, or maybe it's drawing a painting and you do something that you do in every painting that's a big flair for yourself. That's that nitrogen, that's that flair, that real spark in who you are into your hobby and bringing it back to you, because then you use that and you use it to really build up who you are for the next time, the next hobby. Use it to build up for the next project that you want to do. I mean, it's kind of a learning process in a way. And that's really what life will always be, is a learning process. No day is going to be the same as the previous day. No year is going to be the same as the previous year. But you take that experience from before and you build upon it and you make it you make it unique to yourself, and you really start to add your flares to them. You really start to add yourself to them. And then that's when that nitrogen really kicks. That's when you really start to see that flair, and you really start to develop that taste of who you are. And when you look back and you start to see where you all began and where you were before, and even before that start point, that makes it so sweet. That makes it incredibly, incredibly sweet. And like I said, nitrogen ends up bringing out the caffeine in coffee and cold brew. The more you start to do these things that you love, the more you start to do these things that you really value, the easier it is to wake up in the morning. You start to feel motivated. You start to feel like today is worth it. You start to be thankful for that time that you gave yourself, to that effort, those emotions that you let yourself experience. It's really easy to say it now when you're not doing it. It's really easy to say how it could be. But I'm not living your life. I'm not going through your experiences. I'm not the selfishness that you need to be. This is just coming from me, from what I felt. This is coming from what I gained out of being selfish, out of being cold. And I encourage you to do the same. I encourage you to value yourself and to be cold and to be selfish and to really pick up on those cues that you're waiting for. I encourage you to really get up and get out there and start to experience the things you want to experience. Start to really put yourself out there in a sense of, hey, my name is Alex and I like these things. Once you're cold and you're selfish, tomorrow will be a much better day. So thank you again for tuning into The Roasted Mind. This podcast has been really eye-opening to me. It's been really influential in my day-to-day. And it's really cool seeing and hearing the people that really can take away from it. From my closest friends to people that are just from my outer circle, like I talked about last episode. It's really nice to hear that, and I appreciate all of you. So thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next week. All right? See ya.